Hello, welcome or welcome back, depending on if you're new here. Today I am swatching and trying out a super fun new addition to my art supplies, which are these Caran D'Ache Neocolor IIs. I was able to try them out briefly at the first art workshop that I've ever been to with artist Min Lee. I'll link her account below. She was nice enough to let us try out her art supplies during the workshop, and as soon as I tried these, I knew I had to get a couple of them. So if you've never heard of these before, these are water-soluble wax pastels. So they write sort of like crayons, but you can use water over them and they dissolve and they're super pigmented and just really cool. I am going to swatch these out and then do a couple of experiments because there's a lot of different ways to use these and to layer them. The colors that I have here are not a specific set. I just went to Blick and picked out a bunch that I wanted since they sell them individually. The colors I chose are white, black, Toledo brown, carmine, pink, lilac, sapphire blue, cobalt blue 5%, dark green, light olive, golden yellow, yellow, and Sahara yellow. I don't remember how much I paid for these in store. When I looked them up online, it looks like they're $2 each, but I know when I was in store, if you got at least 6 of them, they were like bundled and it was a slightly cheaper. So they're definitely not cheap, but they are really fun to play with. I'm swatching these on my normal cold press Arches paper that I use for my watercolor swatches. I'll do tests later with both cold press and hot press paper. My first thought while swatching these was that they are definitely super bright and vibrant, and as soon as the water touches them, they really just go. So I actually found myself having trouble getting a gradient because I was unused to how much color I would need to lay down first before the water was added, or if I should just like color at the top and then drag it down instead of doing the gradient dry first. Which is not a fault of the materials, that's just me trying to figure out how to use them. You may have noticed that I am using my water brushes with these, and that's because I know I'm going to have to do more scrubbing on these when I really want to get the lines to go away, and I don't want to ruin my watercolor brushes. Also, these are wax-based pastels, and I'd prefer not to have wax residue on the brushes that I use with my watercolors. So generally, I'll be using my water brushes throughout this whole thing because I don't really use them that often, and I don't really care if they have wax residue in them or if I have to scrub a little. I'm mostly happy with the colors that I chose for this. I will say the lilac is definitely not what I normally think of as a lilac. I feel like in my mind a lilac is usually a much lighter color, but I did want a purple and this is a nice purple. The name doesn't match for me. The two that I probably would have switched were the dark green. Looking at the actual wax pastel itself, you can tell that it is a bit of a blue leaning color, but I wasn't expecting it to be so blue leaning when I actually got the water out on top of it. I would have liked a warmer dark green, so I mean I'm gonna keep using it for now, but I think I would have chosen another one instead of this one if I had known. And I think same with sapphire blue. I wanted to do something that was a little bit closer to like an ultramarine-y color, or for a good sort of primary. And I don't not like it, but I think that I probably should have chosen another one. The dark green isn't what I was expecting when I first used it. The sapphire blue is what I was expecting, and I think I just chose wrong, if that makes sense. So there's only 2 colors where I was a little bit meh about. Getting used to seeing how much water and how much scrubbing you would have to do to get rid of some of the lines was really interesting. There's a couple that I thought were a little more stubborn than others, and I don't know if that is the pastel itself or if that was how hard I was coloring when I did the dry layer, so that'll be interesting to experiment more with. And of course, this is cold pressed paper, so it was going to be a little bit harder to get that texture out anyway because the paper itself is textured. I know some people use these as almost in a gouache way where you can layer a light color on top of a dark color, and as someone who uses watercolor, that is definitely not what I am able to do normally, so that is also something that I am excited to play around with. So overall, happy with my color choices for the most part. There's a couple that maybe I'll have to get new ones in the future if I find myself using these often. But those are the swatches, and let's get into the experiments. There are lots of ways to use these, and I wanted to see what I would like the most in terms of how I can incorporate it into my own process. If you have used Neocolor IIs before, let me know how you like to use them and what you like to use them with in the comments, because I feel like it would be really helpful just to see how many different ways people are incorporating these pastels into their process. So starting with only Neocolors first, this is on cold pressed B paper, which is 100% cotton but only 200 GSM, so it's a little thinner. And it's cold pressed, but it's on the smoother side for cold pressed paper. And on this one, I figured I would do a first layer of the pastels, then use water on top, and then do details dry on top of that. So I'm just doing some little fish here. The blue definitely dried lighter than I thought. You know, that's just something that's good for me to know, that I'll need to use more of that color in the future to get the sort of color to pop after it's dried. And it was interesting on the cold pressed paper to again see how much water and scrubbing I would need to do for those lines to blur away. I feel like the first touch of water, they really just sort of go in terms of spreading the pigment around, but those marks are sort of still left behind, especially on this cold pressed paper, which is interesting. I don't know that I don't feel the need to get rid of all of them. I feel like they have some nice texture that they leave behind, and I don't mind keeping that. It is definitely an adjustment to get used to not being able to do as small and precise details, or how you have to maneuver the pastels to be able to get sort of thinner lines. I know that you can sharpen these, but the thought of wasting expensive pigment makes me cringe, so I don't know that I will be sharpening mine. So I feel like I'm gonna end up taking this as a bit of a fun challenge, where not being able to be so sharp and specific with my details will force me to be a bit more loose and playful, and probably work a little bit bigger, which is not a bad thing. So that's definitely something that I will be taking away from this first test of just the Neocolors. Experiment 2 is more fish. I went with Neocolor first and then colored pencil on top. Since these are wax-based, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to layer the colored pencil on top very well, but they worked together beautifully. So the sharp details that I was worried about before could easily be achieved by adding colored pencil for detail instead, which I don't normally do a ton of colored pencil in my process, but maybe I will when I use these, who knows. And now for these last few, I'm switching over to hot press paper. This is Blick 100% hot press paper in a block. For the first test in the top left corner, I am going just Neocolors, no water at all, and I liked this process. I like the way that the texture of the Neocolors look on the smoother paper, where obviously there's still some texture here that it's creating, but it's a little bit softer and less pronounced. I do think that I would like this better if I had added some water, but I wanted to see what it would look like if I didn't use any at all. Now on the bottom left corner, I did sort of what I wanted to do on the top once I had finished, which was I did the Neocolor layer first and then just added a little bit of water, because what I really wanted to do at the top was add just enough water to sort of blend some of the lines to add a nice contrast to the texture that the pastels have. And I was happy with this one. I think that I really like, figuring out which things to blend and which to leave textured. This is, though, where I started to get a little bit frustrated with that dark green color, because I definitely wanted to be this dark green to be more of a warm color than it is, and I can already tell that I'm gonna want to be getting a different color instead. But anyway, that's test number 2. And then I moved on to test number 3, which was the Neocolor first, and then really trying to add a lot of water and blending it out. And not blending everything, because again, you don't want to completely lose that texture necessarily, but I used a lot more water than I did in the last one. And again, this was where that dark green color, not for me, I think. So I do think that I wasn't super happy with the lines left on the green leaves. I think that in the future, I would want to be a little bit more intentional with how I colored those leaves in, knowing that there was going to be some lines left behind at the end. Because I think that I didn't do myself any favors with not being intentional about the line placement and the mark making that I was doing, which just is something that you have to be a little bit more aware of with these, since it's not, watercolor where as long as it's still wet, you can sort of blend it out, Now for the last tests on this page, I did watercolor first, waited for it to dry, and then came back with the Neocolors on top. And I have a feeling that this is how I will mostly be using these. So this first one was the watercolor layer, and then the pastels and no water on top of the pastels. And I do really like how this one came out. I think that I really like adding the looser lines with the pastels on top of the watercolor. Again, I really like that texture of the pastel on top of the smoother watercolor layer. And I also thought this was where I tried using the white on top of some of the darker details just to see how it would show up and in that vase at the bottom, and I liked that as well. I think that it's nice to sort of have that option instead of just, accidentally painting over something you wanted to be light and that's that, And then this last one on the page was watercolor first. I let that dry, and then I used the Neocolors, and then I went back and used more water on top of the Neocolors. I also experimented a little bit with putting some of the lighter colors on top of the darker watercolor layer that was already down, and I think that I learned a lot in this particular one about layering the different colors both on top of each other and on top of the watercolor underneath, and how much I think I would want to blend them versus leave the marks visible. On the left flower, I ended up blending it out too much at the end, which you'll see, and I wasn't really happy with the left one. And the right one, I learned from the left one and didn't blend it out as much, and I was happier with how the marks left behind looked rather than it being too blended away. My favorite part of this last one, though, is actually how the leaves ended up. I liked using the light green on top of the darker leaf as just a fun little lighter detail and color variation, and I definitely think that that's something that I would incorporate in the future. These last two experiments are definitely gonna end up being how I would use these more in my actual practice, realistically. And often I'm doing line work with ink pen and then painting afterward. So this would be a bit of a flip where I do the watercolor and then I add line work and details with the pastels afterward, which, as I said before, I think will end up forcing me to be a bit looser and more playful in my mark making, and I'm excited to see how that plays out. All in all, I'm really happy with these. I'm excited to see how I can incorporate them into my practice going forward. I think that they're so vibrant, they're fun to use, there's so many ways that you can use them. It'll lead to some really playful pieces, and yeah, I am looking forward to experimenting with them more. I'll leave a link to these in the description if you're interested in learning more about them. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing because it really helps the channel out. Don't forget to tell me how you use Neocolor IIs in the comments, and if you have any favorite colors or recommendations for a warmer, darker green, please let me know. And I will see you in the next one.